Eyeball. And here we are for the 100th episode of Dualistic Unity Raw, which is fucking exciting. I have to say, not only is it our 100th episode, but it's our 2-year anniversary. Dualistic Unity is 2 years old as of today. That's incredible. I have no idea how we are where we are, because admittedly, it's just one step at a time. It's always been one step at a time. I was just thinking 2 years ago, we were doing an episode a week. We were having a group a week. That was it. And the community was growing. The Discord had 20 members, right? That was it. And here we are with almost 20,000 people in the audience. Our 8th retreat coming up next week. Netherlands retreat coming up on November 11th, which is going to be our largest event, and so much more on the way. We're working with other people now. We have community members offering their services and their assistance. We have groups online that are forming, groups in person that are forming. We have all kinds of cool shit happening. And what's great is that you and I are just sitting here stoned shooting the shit still.
Yeah, it's fucking insane to reflect on everything that's happened and is happening now, and just how it all started with the question of, hey, you ought to start a podcast. And I was just ripe with questions and curiosity and just ready to dig into what the hell was going on with some of the realizations that I was starting to have and the shifts in perspective. And one of the craziest parts is that those shifts haven't stopped. Like, they continue to happen each and every day. And it's been interesting reflecting on the last 2 years, and even just thinking about, like, part of me, it feels like a eternity ago, and then part of me feels like I don't even know if any time's passed at all. And I guess that's the paradox of all of this. And it's interesting too, because I feel like insanely different, and yet I don't know if I seem different on the outside, and yet on the inside I think my perspectives on everything have changed so much, and my assumptions about what this is all about have certainly changed drastically. And with that has come a lot of shifts in my perspective of myself. And even more recently, I actually filmed a solo episode, and it was going to be about my experience with weed, but I decided last minute to change it. And I was just, it's in the process of uploading now. It changed it to just talking about my shifting perspectives of myself and how much they have changed, and how much it's still changing, to the point that I've realized that it's changed so much that my perspective of myself is never going to be correct. And there's a part of me that gets uncomfortable as shit, realizing that I'll never be able to actually know myself, or how I'm doing, or what's going on, or anything. And it's equally as uncomfortable as it is freeing, and trying to get a grasp for what is happening, and therefore being able to have a actual perspective of what's happening, both about myself, with myself, but also what's going on, quote unquote, outside of myself. And so it's been interesting, but I think more recently there's been an ability for me to kind of take a little bit of a step back, I think, which has been really helpful, because I think for the past 2 years, it's just kind of been continuing step after step after step after step, and just kind of going with whatever happens. And there hasn't been as much of an ability for me to take a step back and gain an appreciation for what's going on, and for how much I've changed. And beyond all that, just the potential for myself and what's happening right now, and I think that is something that I've really been able to gain an appreciation for just in the last couple weeks, like, not having the day-to-day conversation as much and an ability to just realize, like, "Oh, fuck, they're" like, what like, and really take a step back and think, like, "What do I wanna do with my life? And what do I wanna do with things and with this experience?" Because there's almost been a pushing away of the reality of having the opportunity to make waves and ripples, like, "Oh," I've had this perspective like, "Oh, I'm not Andrew just kinda going with the flow," but the reality is that I am as well as everything else, and there is a reality of the influence that has the potential to be had, not in a specific way, but just in being myself. And the more I'm able to settle into that and the actions that I'm able to take, like there is know what that is necessarily that I know. Did I just glitch
You
a tiny
did.
bit?
You
Fuck.
did
Mm,
glitch a tiny bit. Just for a second, though, we're
alright,
doing pretty good with Restream. Shout out to Restream. I do want to say quickly, not to interrupt you, but
go for it.
there is a noticeable change in you as a whole, and there has been for a long time. But and I mentioned this before because again, I'm a parent, and when you see your kid every day, not referring to you as my kid, just using the the comparison, when you see your child every day, you don't necessarily recognize how much they're growing up, and it's just because you just saw him yesterday. So the change from one day to another seems really small, right? But when you look back a year, you look back 2 years, and you see the hesitation when you spoke. And then you look now at the fact that you'll just start an episode and start talking. You don't have to know necessarily where you're going. You don't necessarily have to feel like yeah, I know how to tie this up. This is going to sound good. Like you don't do any of that. You just talk now. And that lack of hesitation is because you are willing to be yourself, because you're throwing in to the risk. Essentially, it's like anything could happen, but that's been true the whole fucking time. That's been true the whole time. Anything could always happen. You just thought about things a lot because you thought that would somehow help, but it didn't stop things from being potentially possible, right? You thinking about something doesn't stop reality from acting the way reality is acting. And so the only difference, really, Andrew, especially, is the fact that you have gone through waves of recognizing that the shit you think about doesn't help and isn't really based on reality. And you'll let that go and then you'll feel better for a bit. You're like, yeah, that's it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but wait a minute. Oh, fuck. That means there's all this shit happening. There's all this other stuff happening. Ah. And then you'll start making thoughts and assumptions about them. You'll take the shit really seriously. You'll try to establish some sense of control. What am I supposed to be doing here? Which way am I supposed to be going? Am I acting the right way? And then you'll let all of that stuff go, and then you'll relax and you'll be like, yeah, that's better. Oh yeah, because I didn't have to think about any of that. And all of a sudden the awareness clears again, and now all of a sudden there's more. And you go through the same cycle again of just, oh god, I better take this really seriously. I better take myself really seriously. Am I doing well enough? Am I doing well? Is this how I should be doing? And then you're like, right. I don't need to do any of that. And you shake it off. And it's the same goddamn cycle over and over and over again. And it's just the cycle of maturity. It's the cycle of awareness, of growth. It's the cycle of continuing to push past your limitations to find that there are in fact more and more and more challenges beyond those limitations, that the limitations themselves were almost a safe little cocoon to stop you from the ongoing process of growth. And that's really it. And it's exciting when it's exciting, and it's challenging when it's challenging. But the whole thing is we're like, how am I doing? And that's what fucks us up. That's what fucks us up. And when we're not doing that, we're dancing. We're making the most out of each and every moment, because it's not about how we're doing, it's about what am I doing now? Not how am I doing in this journey, because there is no fucking journey. It's just how am I doing now? And it's just practice, but remembering sometimes that's going to feel fucking shitty. Sometimes it's going to feel overwhelming. Sometimes it's going to feel like it's too much. This is the path of growth. This has always been the path of growth. This is why children complain about responsibility. This is why, children don't like having to be in charge of their own shit. They want people to take care of them, right? Is because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, it seems like a lot. Like you ask any kid about, dealing with bills and stuff, and they'll just look at you like, they have no idea whatsoever because there's so much there. There's so much in terms of being an adult versus being a child. Well, the same is true between being a human and being reality. It's a hell of a difference. There's a big step there in mentality and maturity. And this is the step that we collectively are going to take or are taking. Because the alternative is that we continue to not clean up our room and eventually it just catches fire.
Yeah, fuck, that's pretty fucking spot on, dude. And yeah, because it's like every time, and it's been fucking gnarly, the cycles of like, oh, when I'm not looking at all of that weight and shit, like I feel free, and then like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and then it's like a moment to moment, do something or don't, and it's like a fork in the road as I see, because every time I've felt, and it's been such a frequent sort of cycle more recently, whereas I think maybe, I don't know, a year ago or something, it was less it was like a less frequent freedom to wait to freedom to wait, and it's all based on me. It's not based on anyone else. It's not based on anything else. It's just based on my perspective, and that feeling like there are times where I see things, but it was things that I've been doing that then I see them, and it's like, do something about it or don't, and depending on what I do about it, not what anyone else does about it, what I do about it, it's either accentuate, amplify the freedom or amplify the weight. And it comes down to me, and it's not, no one else is doing it for me. No one else is doing anything for me. But with the freedom comes the vision, comes the clarity, comes the seeing all of the fucking shit, comes the like looking under my bed and being like, I thought my room was clean, and it's not. There's a lot of shit under my bed. And so just being open, and this is honestly a lot of what I talked about in that last episode, like the recognition of the potential comes with the realization of the avoidance of certain things, and whether it's irrelevant, whether the avoidance has to do with my avoidance of being reality, my avoidance of taking responsibility, my avoidance of not wanting to look at the things, because when I see certain things, when I have certain clarity about things I've been avoiding, there's a potential, there is an initial weight that comes with that, and then it's like you can feel the weight and let it suppress you or compress you or do something about it, and then that weight isn't there as much, but the weight's under the surface if you avoid it anyway. And it's like, pulling stuff out from under your fucking bed and either folding it up and putting it in your closet or putting it back under your bed, and there's no one else to do it for you. Like it's my fucking room, it's my fucking experience. As much as there's the pointing at other things happening or other things going on, it's just me in my fucking room. And I can think about, other things happening, but it's like an unavoidable seeing of things that is within my experience, and it's responsibility. And when you've said things like and admittedly, and part of me feels like a little fucking kid with some of this stuff, and I'm like, fuck, that's uncomfortable to realize, like, that I feel like like it's childish behavior at points, but, and it's like, oh god damn it, that doesn't feel good. Oh, that's so fucking uncomfortable. But at the same time, there's things that can be done about it, and there's almost this desire when the weight comes in to like want to be sure that you are this fucking awful, irresponsible piece of shit, but you can't be sure of that either. And that doesn't help anyone or anything. And as uncomfortable as seeing those things are, there is then the opportunity. And if you're not seeing it, feeling some of that, there's not the ability to do something about it. So there's a benefit to seeing it and feeling that weight because it actually brings it into your fucking line of sight. It's almost like, you have blinders on and the blinders widen a little bit and you see a little bit more and you can do something about it, or you can fucking shutter the blinders a little bit more. And as you see a little bit more, you can do something about it. And then you see more. And it's like this cycle of freedom to responsibility, weightlessness to weight, weightlessness to weight. And the more you want to, if you want to go back to judging yourself for just seeing a little bit more, it's like you didn't see it, and then you open up your blinders a little bit more, and then you saw it. And sometimes I have this desire to judge myself, but then it's like closing my blinders as I judge myself for it, as opposed to just fucking seeing it and doing something instead of running towards judgment. And I've talked about this before, like the realization that, and so many of the realizations I've had kind of are coming to fruition. I'm seeing where they're coming from. Like self-judgment is an avoidance pattern. It's another means of avoidance in certain perspectives. And I know I've said that before. And there's like this back and forth that if you don't look at what you're avoiding, there's going to be, more, the feeling of the weight is now felt, whereas before it was under the surface. Now it's not under the surface anymore. And so it's not this background feeling where you don't really, it's like this subtle discomfort. It's like right in your fucking face, but now you can do something about it. So that underlying discomfort isn't there when you do something about it as much. And that's the process of, I've always wondered with certain fears, underlying anxiety, concerns, worry, like, oh, where does that stuff come from? And it's like it's all coming up. And now I have the opportunity to do things about it. And then I don't have those things anymore. Like there has been way more experiences in the last month, 2 months for me where like I'm not concerned about anything and I'm acting freely and unashamed and just fucking doing shit so freely that I don't even recognize myself. And there's almost a running from that. Like, I want to go back to the me that I knew. Like, who the fuck is this person? Like, as I think about it, but then as I'm doing it, it's like I'm free as fuck when I'm doing it, feeling great. And I have the ability to run with that. But then it's like the Sodom and Gomorrah, or however you say that, where you look back and then the weight fucking grabs you again. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking there.
No, that's perfect. And I want to cover something that you brought up as we were going through there, which was when it comes up, now you have an opportunity to deal with it. What do we mean by that? Not what you think, not what anybody here is thinking. It's like, oh my God, okay, all these thoughts are coming up. Okay, I got to deal with it. Let go, relax. That's what deal with it means. Deal with it means to look at it full in the face and recognize that you're still fine, that nothing has changed from the moment where you felt fine to the moment where you don't feel fine, except for the fact that now you're focused on not feeling fine. This is really the only goddamn difference. That's the dealing with it. It's not like, oh, I got to pick it apart. I got to look at it and see what I'm doing wrong. Oh my God, why am I still looking at the shit? You got to stop doing that. Just stop doing that. Just that's part of the problem. Do you understand? That's part of the problem. The reaction is what you're trying to let go of. The reaction is what you're letting go of, which means you can't react to your reaction. You can only relax. You can only relax. That's the dealing with it. The panic is the problem. The stress is the problem. The stress, the habitual, ongoing, oh, God, I'm doing this and feeling terrible. Like that reaction to it is the problem. The feeling's not the problem. It's the response that you have habitually developed to the feeling that you might not be doing well, that you're feeling a little low, that maybe, you're judging yourself a bit. All of a sudden you're lost in thought. You're like, oh my God, I'm obviously doing something wrong, instead of just, that's going to pass. And this kind of goes back to the lesson we were talking about earlier. And anybody who has kids knows this. Anybody who remembers being a kid or even just a middle teenager will remember this. Every single thing that you are told feels fucking personal. So if you haven't done something correctly, and somebody comes over and they're like, hey, this is how you do this correctly. And even if it is that tone, as a teenager or a kid, you'll be like, I've done something wrong, and you will judge yourself. And it is in no way personal. You could quite easily just go, right, That's a good point. And take in the information and move on. But instead, you make it about you. We make it about us. I make it about me. I make it personal. Like it has something to do with me. It's like all of a sudden not doing a thing in a certain way makes me less just because it could be done that way. Do you see how all of a sudden that's a mental game instead of just the process of learning? If we could apply that to our ups and downs, it would change the entirety of our journey. If you're feeling low, if you're judging yourself, if you're feeling like you don't like your life, if you're feeling like you should be somewhere else, all of that stuff, remember those thoughts aren't personal. That's part of a process that's happening right now. You're taking it personally. You're like, well, obviously, this indicates a lot about my journey. No, it's just that your mind can only process so much information at once. It can't process everything at once, and so it's doing so in a stream. You're looking at a very small part of that stream. It'd be like if I showed you 15 seconds of a movie that you'd never seen before, and you decide to take that 15 seconds and tell me what the movie is. That's what we're doing with our stream of thought all the time. All the time. I mean, we look at a 15-second, not even, we look at a half-second thought and the emotion that goes with that, we react, and then we're like, yeah, obviously that's the truth. Obviously, because I'm caught in this reaction. I'm making assumptions about the whole goddamn movie based on this one half second that I'm looking at because I'm afraid of it. Oh my God, there's a clown on the screen. It's obviously about clowns. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what we're doing. And it's just that we're so caught in the reaction. We're so caught in the habit of doing that we think that if we're doing that, now I got to fix this. No, it's the reaction that caught you. It's the reaction to that second. It's the reaction to that thought. It's the reaction to that feeling. That is what you're dealing with. If you could let go of the reaction, it's like, well, what do I do with that? You just sit in it, motherfucker. You just sit in it. If you feel shitty, just feel shitty. It's okay. It's the narrative that makes it stay. It's the story that I'll always feel shitty, and then you believe it. See that? I'll always feel shitty. That's a reaction. I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to hurt myself. That's a reaction. At the moment, you're just sitting there on your ass feeling sorry for yourself. You're not actually doing any of the things you think that you might do. Do you see? That's all reaction to what you're feeling right now. And the alternative is to feel what you're feeling right now and stop giving it a reason. Stop thinking that you know why it's happening based on that one half second of the movie that you've seen. You don't know why the clown's on the screen. You understand? You don't know if it's comedy or horror. You don't know any of it because you can't see the whole fucking movie. So stop reacting like you can. And when you stop reacting, it no longer grabs you by the balls every time you look at it and fucking shakes you because you're not afraid of it. But to think that it's the problem and not your reaction to it, that's the misunderstanding. It's like, oh, I got to do the work. What's the work? It's not picking it apart. It's not establishing control. It's relaxing past the reaction. The work is letting go of the hard work you've created for yourself already. It's the reaction. That's it. You're tearing down your own wall, and that wall is all your panic. Just relax.
Yeah, well said. Because anything you come up with is for why you're feeling a certain way is just going to be an assumption, and then the focus goes to the assumption as opposed to your point, the feeling. And like, what the fuck am I going to do about something if I'm making an assumption about what it is and then feeling like fucking dog shit for it? Like, what good am I going to do anyone feeling like dog shit besides feeling like I'm sure about what's happening? And it's so, I think it's just so, and I don't think it's convoluted, but just different than how I'm used to responding to things. Like that process of looking something uncomfortable in the face and relaxing being the thing that will then allow me to do something with what I'm seeing, do something with when the blinders open up is depending on my reaction to the blinders opening up. If it's like, oh, fuck, judgment, piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. It's like they close off. Whereas, okay, seeing that doesn't mean I'm a piece of fucking garbage and I can relax and just chill. And then it allows me to then do something, allows us to then do something with it, but not anything specific, because it's that assumption that those 15 seconds mean all of this, and I know all of this about everything about the 15 seconds that I'm seeing, and it's a guarantee that this is definitely the case. That's the habitual response that I've done for a long ass time. Like I have to figure this out. I have to dissect this and then deal with it once it's all like spliced out and, you know, set into different understood boxes and ideas of what it means about myself and how I'm doing, and like this means this about me, this means this about me, this means this, and this measurement then has this impact on my value, and then okay, now I got that figured out. Now let's do something. It's like then now I feel fucking shitty. So I'm gonna keep feeling that and focusing my attention on my assumption about what it means. But in the relaxing, in the letting go, it's the letting go of the perception of control about it. Like I can grab it and do something about it and know it. And that's, I think, to your point, like that's it right there is the letting go of the control. And it's fucked. Like it's so fucking interesting. Like it's really fascinating to me that that is the process right there. Like even right now as we're talking, I'm like, oh fuck, that's not what I thought that it was. Like I thought it was a doing something about it that then fixes it or solves it, but it's the assumption that there's something wrong that I have to then fix. This means there's a problem with me. And then once I do this, then the problem will go away. And it's that perspective of cause and effect, problem solution, out of control, in control, uncertainty to certainty. It's like my desire to jump to certainty, thinking that that's what does it, as opposed to being willing to remain relaxed. And I know, like it's fucked too, because I've experienced that spot where I'm not thinking so much, that spot where it is sort of weightless, and then it's like options, and it's like okay, now I'm good as I am, and now options, and there's a reality that just makes sense once I'm there of, oh, there's there's things I can do. There are options. There's not this like, oh fuck, I'm a piece of trash and I gotta fix that and do things to make me not a piece of trash, and that's it. It's like I have to do something to make myself not the piece of shit that I think that I am, or have this perspective of myself that I feel is so certain. It's not that at all, but you can't, like I can't get to that spot through the judgment, and I keep going back to that despite that being the thing that is the ultimate reality. Like that's the ultimate quote unquote lesson, is stop fucking judging yourself. And on the other side of that is where everything makes sense and plays out. And you're not like the feeling of not being as tired, even like that process of judging yourself, feeling a certain way, feeling like you're doing everything wrong. Like I've had the experience or reason not feeling, ah, shit. Did I glitch? All right. I've had the experience of not feeling so caught in my head, and like I don't have to sleep as much. Like I straight up don't. Like I straight up am more energetic all the time. And it goes back and forth, and it's even like a, hour by hour experience sometimes when I'm not thinking about, like I haven't been thinking about myself as much as I have been talking about myself. In a sense, I haven't been thinking about myself, and there's like a different, it's like you plug into a different spot, or you unplug the cord, and it's just like, yeah, infinite sort of energy. And I know that I've had that feeling, and yet there's like a habitual sort of running back to, oh no, there's going to be a benefit to judging. And yet it's just like this fucking compression and exhaustion. And like it's a physical exhaustion. Like I feel way more tired despite doing less shit. It's like it's so fucking half-ass backwards, that judgment, and yet for some reason, like, I keep going back to it and feeling like there's gonna be a way through that, and it's like there's no control in the letting go. There's no sense of control in the letting go of the judgment, and yet I've had the experience for seemingly one of the first times just in the last couple weeks, couple months, and in that spot, like, there is just the ability to do anything, and, like, just so much more energy, and, like, the repercussions of both sides of it, I now kind of and so I guess there's a almost, I don't know, benefit to seeing that, at least, to knowing like, oh, that is an option. There is something on the other side of letting go of my constant self-judgment and criticism and feelings of control and certainty and all of that. And that in itself is the lesson, which I think even just recently I've started to realize, and yet there's still this pull to run back to control and judgment. And I guess that's sort of, there's nothing wrong with that, because you judge yourself for judging yourself, you're fucking judging yourself again. And so it's just here and now, the option to not do that. And I'm starting to gain the realization that there isn't that benefit, and there is another experience to be had that I didn't even know was there until more recently.
I understand very much, and this is the thing, is that, again, I've said this before. I have a lot of time on you in terms of going through this cycle, going through this process, and so the only difference, because people are like, "Well, how are you so certain about any of this?" And I'm like, I'm not certain about anything. I've let go enough times to see that it really does work, and it doesn't work if you're trying to make it work, because that's not letting go, right? But the whole thing is that you really do start to recognize that no, life's actually really cool. Life's fucking incredible. You just got to keep doing it. Like, you just have to let go of the devil, which is your need to feel in control, which is your need to think about yourself, right? And that's it. But that said, don't expect the thoughts to go away, because that's part and parcel of what you are as whatever this human being is. Your brain's going to continue to think dualistically. Thus, it's going to continue to think as a point of me versus everything else. That's a big part of duality, everyone, is that me and everything else, right? And so as long as that's perceived that way, then your brain's going to process the fiction of you. But you are not you versus everything else. You are the entirety of reality. You are the observer and the observed in a perceived interaction with one another. Your brain doesn't see it that way. So it's always going to create an illusion that you could be in control of things over this reality that is obviously separate from you. And that is very much not the case. Now, that said, I find it really interesting, because if you have a chance, Andrew, I would love for you to go back and listen to the episode that we recorded, say, after the first retreat. And the reason is because right now you are back to looking at the ego, the reaction, the thoughts, the self-judgment, all of that as being a bad thing, as being a negative. And after the first retreat, you were very much aware that it's not. You had a very different perspective of exactly why this mode of escapism exists. Because, well, it's funny, and this is how good we are at being reality. We get so caught up in our thoughts that we think we have to escape them, not realizing that they are, in fact, the escape.
Oh, man. Even as you're saying that, like, you just brought me back to that feeling of like, ooh, I can remember like, ooh, I used to think the ego was a bad thing, and it had this underlying like negative sort of tone to it. And after that retreat, I was like, oh, thank God, thank me for that perception of division, for that sense of me versus everything. Because without that, it's like shit is uncertain as fuck, and it's like it's like floating through, and there's at least with some perception of self, some semblance of like experience, like some semblance of, you know, what's kind of going on. But and it's so funny because in that, I remember feeling that in that spot, and then sort of having that clarity to realize like, oh, this is great, but buy in a little too much, and there's a massive unnecessary weight to that feeling of being in control, that relative me versus everything, and all of that sort of wave of weight has the potential to come with it as you buy into it more and more and more. And it's not necessarily about one or the other, like fucking dualistic unity, right? It's not about objective duality or objective unity or getting to one or the other or experiencing one or the other. It's like you're kind of always being both, doing both, always both and neither, right? And you it's just my buying into the idea that I can have control over what? Something that isn't me, like, as opposed to just continuing to be myself through it without this additional idea of how I think it should be going and my opinion of how things are going, and how much that side of it with my opinion, my perspective of how I think things are going, how I think things should be going, and I feel so sure of that. My opinion of how I think my life should be going or playing out. It's like I have no fucking idea how it should be playing out because I don't even know how it is playing out. I have no idea how it is playing out. And it all kind of goes hand in hand and hand in hand with that appreciation for the perception of division, for the sense of me versus everything. And yet there is the potential for that to be taken to an extreme where, the thought of like, I don't want to be here anymore. It's like that is the extreme in the buying into this thing that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And yet I can get so caught in thinking, and it's unreal like how much, and I've realized this, just how much of like my own worst enemy I can be and how shitty I can treat myself. Like, Jesus Christ, dude, if I knew
Hold on.
someone.
I want to stop you there. Because
All
again,
right.
it's your thoughts aren't the problem. Your reaction to the thoughts are the problem. See, you're like, I'm so shitty to myself. No, you just have thoughts that are shitty about you in the same way that you have equal thoughts that are fucking magnificent about you, which are equally dangerous because they can put you up on a pedestal above everyone else. See, thought, the entire spectrum of thought about you exists all the time. It exists all the time. All of it, the shitty ones, the good ones, they're all processing all the time because your brain's trying to figure out where you are in duality. The thoughts aren't the problem. Your reaction to them is the problem. The reason that those thoughts are so shitty, or rather, here's a better way of putting it. The reason it sucks that those thoughts are so shitty are frankly because you're afraid of them. If you weren't afraid of the thoughts telling you you're a bag of shit, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't care. You're like, right, those. And then they'd go by in the same way the thoughts telling you that you're better than everyone go by. But you don't hold on to those because you're like, well, that's obviously bullshit. I'm not better than everyone. That's the only reason those thoughts don't fucking grab you is because you're not as afraid of them. You're not giving them as much credibility. The problem's not the thought. The problem is the reaction to the thoughts. The thoughts will always be there. They will always be there. You will always be the fucking lowest low life in the world and better than everyone. That entire spectrum of thought about you will always exist in potential now. Always. The question is, are you taking those thoughts seriously, or are you just looking at them as the spectrum of perception? This is what I'm always saying. Perception isn't truth. Your thoughts about yourself aren't the truth. They're just a fragment, or a fragment in a very large spectrum that your brain, by virtue of being the best computer in the planet, just processes all the time. All the time. It's the reaction to the thoughts. It's not the thought. You're not judging yourself, is what I'm saying. That's just you taking it personally again. I'm doing something wrong. And that's just another thought. It's just happening. They're just happening.
Yeah. Oh god, it's so funny. Like, even as you're saying that, it's like, of course, yeah, both ends of the spectrum. For whatever reason, there's just a side that it's not even that it's like they're all kind of floating on by, and it's the ones that I take seriously that then judge them in and of themselves and think that I'm doing something as they're going by. Thinking that there's some me to judge, to have an idea about that I can even take seriously. Like, and as
Krishnamurti
I was,
actually said, thoughts always require a thinker. If you're getting caught up in the thought, you are the thinker, and immediately you personalize it as such.
oh, it's like a product. It's like by design. As soon as there's a judgment about the things that you're thinking, like as soon as there's a judgment, it's me judging them. It's not that they have to do with me ever. They're just happening, and I'm it's like I'm creating a perception division as I have an opinion of it, as I have a judgment about judging myself. I'm glad you stopped me, because like as I'm saying, oh, I can have really, oh, I can be my own worst enemy. It's just like me having the thoughts about myself, and the thought of the other end of the spectrum, like, oh, I can love myself so hard. It's like I've never thought that in my life. I've always had like a like, "Ugh, loving yourself, that's like really egotistical." Motherfucker, it's equally as egotistical to judge the fuck out of yourself, or to not like yourself, or to have this assumption that you know that that side has any degree of truth, or to even have an opinion about that side. It's equally as fucking egotistical to think that. And again, I'm like, I'm chilling now because I'm getting into like me having this fucking judgment about me judging. And it's like, oh God, just stop thinking about yourself. Just stop having an opinion about the things going by, and the fear of certain thoughts. Like, they've been there for it's been there for a long time, and yet it hasn't at all. Like, it feels like it's, oh, this thing that I've done for years and years and years, but I've done it here and now, and that's the only spot I've ever done it is here and now. And so the continuation of the doing that is only here and now. Like, it's not this, like, even the habitual nature of it. And I've realized that more recently. It's been incredible to realize that the change only happens now. It's like opportunity presents itself. It's like you have the opportunity to change the entire story of yourself. Like this continued going back to, oh, I'm this type of person, I'm that type of person. Like, I am having a really, really, really difficult time going back to those sort of narratives on any side of the spectrum, even with working out, for example. Like, that's been something that was very much, I always had the perspective that, oh, it's like a habit. I've done it. Like, I've straight up lifted. I've talked about it before, since I was 13. And I was like, oh, it's a healthy habit. And it's like, that's been a weird one for me recently, because it's still very much a focus on myself. And it's like, yeah, people pitch it as like it's healthy. And it's like, it's healthy from a certain perspective in a sense, but you can take it to the point where, and even more recently, like there were times in my life where I worked out 6 days a week and was super focused on it and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, you could say that and there's kind of a narrative, I think, in society that it is, it's a healthy habit, but it's like, it's still focusing on yourself. It's still reinforcing this narrative, this perception of division. So it's been harder for me to pin to that. And as more options open up, it's like when I sit and I've been and you've recommended me kind of do that exercise I used to do and kind of stopped doing because I was like, oh, thinking about me dying and potential regrets and blah blah blah. That's like not something I do as reality. That's like a Andrew thought. And it's like I had this whole narrative about not doing those types of exercises anymore, despite they're neutral fucking shit. And it's like, yeah, I used to do it every single day. It's like I don't necessarily have to do it every day, but like, here and there, check in, maybe take a second to think about it. Think about like, oh, I could die tomorrow. What do I want to do? Because then there's almost a balance in doing things as opposed to things being done to you, and like the taking the wheel of your life as opposed to, you told me last week, being in the back seat. It's like, there's a balance there where it's like, you take the driver's seat, and it's not to say that there's something wrong with that, but like there's an extreme end of that maybe is more control, and it's always a balance. There's no right or wrong to either side of it. And so as I sit in that spot, it's like, I've had to wonder, like, okay, why do I lift weights so often? Yeah, there's a vanity to it. Admittedly, like there is some degree of that. It's not entirely that. There is some, you know, willingness, whatever the health aspect of it, but it's like, I've been running a little bit more because there's a side of that that's like, there's a cardio side of it, and it's like heart health, and it's like, bench pressing. That's not doing as much for reality itself. It's more of like an Andrew focus, and there's not a right or a wrong. You don't have to judge yourself for doing it, but there's a balance with it. And as I sit in the spot of like, okay, I'm 100, what do I want to have done with my life? What do I want to do with my life? It's like those priorities have shifted, and I haven't taken the time to look at that and like what actual impact slash influence do I want to have on things. It's like there's certain habits. If I shit. Oh,
Well, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
me.
This is Sarah, your
And I will cut off Andrew there because obviously he is still traveling. I wanted to mention very quickly to everybody that it is season 3, episode 20, called One and All. That was the episode I was referring to after the first retreat. Do go and check this out, or check out that episode after this one if you can, just because the difference is noticeable for sure. There's a calm that goes with the other end where you're not reacting to your thoughts anymore. It really is that. But that's when you start to realize that, getting caught up in this stuff isn't necessarily a bad thing if you weren't so afraid of it. It's kind of like watching horror movies. If you're looking at all the negative thoughts and all the self-judgment and all the self-loathing in your head, you could look at them as a horror movie. And if you've ever watched a horror movie, the more you think it's real, the scarier it is. And this is something that we tell our kids as they're growing up, like, don't forget, it's not real. Right. And that reminds them. But this is the same with the thoughts about yourself, telling you that you're not enough, that you're in danger, that you're a danger to yourself, that, you're always going to go through this, that, obviously there's something wrong with you. All of those thoughts, it's just a horror movie that you're taking seriously. And what's worse is it may not even actually be a horror movie. You might just be taking those, 5 to 15 seconds and making an assumption. That's all. Possibly that is just the moment that you're looking at that looks scary, that leads to the victory for the hero. Because it's one ongoing story that goes up and down. You don't know. And so I wanted to mention quickly before we part ways here, because we are coming to the end of this episode, couple of things. when you're really deep in the shit, when you're really thinking about yourself, when you're really caught up in the thoughts, I don't know, super useful. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that's true. I don't know that's true. I don't know that's going to happen. I don't know that's how they see me. I don't know because you don't. All of those thoughts that you're worried about are all assumptions. The more you're afraid of them, the more you're going to go, is that true? You don't know. Rely on that like a motherfucker. Okay. Secondly, once you start getting better at that and you get out of your shit more often and you start to feel your shit creeping up, and Andrew did this earlier in the episode, just a long, slow exhale. Just a long, slow exhale where you are actually focused into your breath. You and your breath are the same thing. Like you are exhaling. You are the full action of exhaling, and it draws all of your attention to it. And that's more or less enough. It really is. But it's just a matter of how deep in the shit are you? And if you're really reacting, you're like, God, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I don't know. I don't know. That's it. You know, and you're going to be left with, well, if I don't know, what do I do? That's a good question. What do you do? What do you do right now? Go vacuum. You know, when was the last time you vacuumed your floor? When was the last time you cleaned your toilet? When was the last time you went for a walk? Bet you there's a park nearby your house that you haven't visited ever. You know, things like that. Like those are things that you can do other than just get lost in the thought. But as soon as you get lost in the reaction to the thought, remember, it's not the thought, it's your reaction to it. Thoughts don't mean shit unless you take them seriously. You have 1,000 thoughts a day you don't take seriously. It's the ones you do take seriously that you think are the problem, instead of you taking them seriously, which is really the only problem. So that said, we got a few minutes here. I'll let Andrew wrap it up. It's good to see you again, man. I'm glad that we managed to do this episode. 2 years. Holy fucking shit. Also, anybody, if you can make it to the Netherlands retreat, don't miss out. It's going to be fantastic. You'll actually get a chance to experience the other end of the spectrum that we were discussing earlier in this episode. So, Andrew, it's all yours, buddy.
Yeah, this has been a blast. It's good to chat again on one of these. I know it's been a bit, but I think it was a good, as much as there was, you know, self-judgment in regards to whatever. There's yeah, it's good every now and then to, I think, take a step back and just wonder about, you know, be willing to look at things and gain an appreciation and shift perspectives on things. And I think that's what I've been able to do. And like, there's definitely a tank of gas behind me, I think, now with differing perspectives. And as much as there's the, I don't know, cycles that still sometimes happen, this has been a great chat and a lot of fun, because it's interesting when you look at it or realize that, you know, you're continuing to do something and then continuing to do it thinking that you're not, but you are, and it's not the thing that you think. It's not the way out. The path out isn't what you think that it is, because there's not a path out. Like, the path out is the path in, and you know, you keep thinking that path out is the path out, and you keep like fucking going in. It's like whoom, 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 whoom. It's like, I don't know. Deep breath, where you're at, do something, and all of a sudden it's like it's not there anymore, and now you're doing stuff, and now you're sailing again, cruising along, and it was never what you thought that it was. But as long as you keep thinking that it is what you think it is, it's going to keep being something. You're going to keep being something as long as you continue to have an opinion about what you're doing in any way, shape, or form. And so it's so funny how, you know, we've talked about these things so many times, and yet it's like the same types of things over and over and over from differing perspectives, differing points of views. Because on the one end, like, I feel like I've changed so much and am freer and have more potential. And then on the other, there's obviously some of the stuff we've talked about. And there is that, as soon as you look back, there is all of these things. And yet when you look back, you see everything and you're like, I got to do something about all of this. And like, that's not going to help you do anything. It's just the one at a time thing. Just do something. And again, you don't know. You don't know, period. You don't know what the thing to do is, even, but just something. And it'll start making more sense the less judgment there is, the less certainty there is about anything. Clarity comes into play more frequently, more seamlessly. And there's a seamlessness to the flow of things. And the, what to do next is just boop, yep, that, oop, yep, that, oop, yep. And it's just this natural sort of process, as opposed to when I think I know what it is and what to do, it's like there's a fog there because it's the same mechanism of control and certainty that I keep running back to that doesn't have the benefit, never has had the benefit, never has had done the thing that I thought it was ever going to do. So it's been a lot of fun. And
I have one more thought before we wrap up. And I think this is important because I know having this conversation, it can be easy to go, like, right. I know this. Like, why do I have to keep coming back to this conversation with Ray where I feel like he's reminding me? And I just want you to keep in mind that I'm not reminding you shit. I'm not even talking to you, man. I'm talking to myself. Like, all of the stuff I said in this episode is me rehashing the same stuff. And I could quite easily judge myself and go, why do I have to rehash this again? Because that's the process. That's exactly the process we're in. It's not that you need to remind yourself. It's that you are going through the cycle of understanding, of clarity about what is happening on the one spectrum versus the other. I'm going through the same thing. I'm always talking to myself. I'm not reminding you. I'm not reminding our listener. I'm not telling anyone anything. I am talking to myself because, frankly, I'm still going through the cycle too. Like, I am also still gaining clarity about everything I am. And so I'm not reminding anyone of anything. If anything, if you got anything from this conversation, it's because you're reminding yourself, which is all that's ever happening. Just let it happen. Thank you for joining us, everyone. This has been a fun episode. We will see you again soon. Next week is our Vancouver retreat. So the schedule will change a little bit there, but I'll be on Patreon in a little while, and we'll talk to you then.